This episode is brought to you by Farmers Insurance.
Breaking news this hour, the head of a prominent monastery in Kiev is taken before a court. That's as a clampdown on religious figures with traditional ties to Russia intensifies. Also ahead on the program.
The US and its allies, they want to do everything in their power to preserve their privileged position in the world.
Following a Security Council meeting at the UN, Russia's deputy ambassador to the organization tells RT Western powers have an insatiable drive to maintain their global hegemony. India's flagship airline insists it will continue flights over Russian airspace despite pressure from Western partners. And a new report claims the Central African Republic is in a dire situation as near half the population faces food. Midday in Bogota.
No contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Some things just make you feel more alive than others. Like the rush of adrenaline from an SUV that roars from 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds. Jaguar delivers that thrill every day. The F-Pace, how Jaguar makes an SUV.
Will Turkey ratify Sweden's NATO membership? Stockholm says it can't fulfill all Ankara's demands. As the bloc's membership requires unanimous approval, what would make Turkey change its mind? And what does all of this mean for NATO's future? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Mohammed Jamjoom. One of the many fallouts of Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been that previously neutral Nordic countries
So setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice how low you're sitting. So it's about an inch lower than a regular Cayman as well. And so, you know, that's obviously part of the GT4 package, make it feel a little sportier and track ready. And you have excellent visibility though still. I mean, you have, obviously, again, everything's a little bit smaller here since the vehicle's a little smaller, but you have still a nice large windshield, pretty easy to see around this A-pillar. This car gets so many looks. It's so funny how many people are already staring at this thing. But yeah, it's very easy to see. I mean, out of the back, you have that spoiler, which, you know, kind of blocks your view a little bit, but it's not too bad. I think you'll be able to see around it just fine, but we'll continue to test that out as we continue on. But now we're on a main road here at a little bit of a higher speed, about 45 miles per hour, and you can hear a lot of, road noise, tire noise. We got Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires, and this, the engine and everything, it's a very raw experience, and I love that about this vehicle. You know, it's not going to be the greatest cruiser, but for what this is intended for, track days and spirited driving, it's going to be fantastic. But I mean, yeah, you do get a lot of road noise here, but I will say, so the suspension does have an adaptive setting here, and so right now we're in the comfort mode or the normal mode for the chassis, and you feel the little grooves in the road, but it's not jarring. It's actually pretty comfortable so far, at least on these pretty well-maintained roads. Other things that I noticed, even just sitting in a red light, you just feel this whole engine vibrating. I mean, the passenger seat, I can actually watch it shake while I'm sitting stationary. It's kind of hilarious just how alive this car feels. Every time you start it up, it just feels like it's this living creature that's breathing. You feel everything going on in this vehicle. I mean, even just, cruising here on like a highway, feel way more. I mean, all the little vibrations and everything, it's just so much more feedback. And even it's just hilarious how just even sitting in a red light with your foot on the brake, you feel the brakes more. And one thing I will say about the brakes is that they do like to squeak a little bit here, even though this one just has the regular brakes. They are a little squeaky still, but I think that's partially because the pads you probably have on this are a little more aggressive and set up again for track duty. And so that's just what happens with track pads, you get a little bit of squeaking. So one thing to note there that's kind of interesting, even without the carbon ceramics. And so, yeah, I mean, just kind of cruising behind traffic, you know, it actually still is an exciting experience, even though obviously this vehicle has such high limits, and if you're not exploiting those limits, you might feel like it's a snooze fest. But with this car, you're feeling and hearing so much that it isn't still. It still is very alive, and it keeps you on high alert because of all the feedback you're receiving and just how much is going on here. And another thing that I really love too, whenever I was first setting off, is the clutch is so easy here. Now this vehicle only has about 600 miles on it, so it's broken in, but it's not, you know, heavily worn in or anything. But it's just still like, it's such an easy to use clutch, and I love that. And one other thing too, so you know, a lot of people say, especially with the previous gen GT4, you needed to do a shorter final drive because it was way tall with its gearing. And you know, I'll have to wind this motor out to see how this one feels. But you know, cruising in 5th gear, I mean, I'm sitting at 65 miles per hour. I'm sitting at 3,000 RPMs in 5th gear, and there's still plenty of punch here. I mean, even though peak torque doesn't come on until about 5,000 RPMs, and peak torque's not a lie, it's only 309 pound-feet. But even still, it still has plenty of punch for passing. And even if I were to go up into 6th gear, you're still doing fine. But anyway, we have the auto blip on, and as we're coming up to this little off-ramp, wow, it's so grippy. Man, this is insane. That was so effortless and so flat. And again, I wasn't even in the sport chassis setup or anything like that. Just in normal mode, it still is so flat. It's pretty impressive. And by the way, this is with the exhaust in its normal mode. There is a sport mode, but I haven't turned that button on yet. I figured I'd wait until we get our first acceleration done and put it on then. I'm pleasantly surprised with everything about this. It's punchier. I think the gearing feels a little shorter than it did in the previous gen, to me at least. It feels, I mean, obviously you have a little more power here than you did in the old GT4 too, with this new engine, so that might help things as well. But you know, it doesn't feel like it, you know, wants to be bogging down or that it feels too slow. And you can also, now, you know, whenever they first launched these, it was manual transmission only, but now you can get a PDK option for this if you want. And then with that, you know, you'll have even closer spaced gears, and that should help it feel even a little punchier. But I still love the way this 6-speed manual feels. It just, with the auto blip feature, it is really easy too, because it's just so precise with rev matching those downshifts. And since this isn't my car, I'm not going to bother trying to be a heel and toe champion. I'm just going to let the car do it on its own, because it will do it better than I can anyway, probably. So, but this shifter is so nice feeling too. So it's nice short throws, but it's not too stiff. Some short throw shifters are really stiff, especially aftermarket ones. This, you know, it still gives you a good amount of leeway there, and feels, you know, flexible enough without feeling like it's sloppy either. And I really love it. It's so mechanical with the notchiness of it. It's like, it feels so good. It's been a long time since I felt a shifter that was this communicative and just felt this good in every single gear. You're never going to miss a shift, I think, in this car, because it is just so well defined and so precise. Another thing is throttle response. So perfect and immediate, and I think that's why, you know, that combined with the clutch is what makes it so easy to be smooth from a stop in this thing, because everything does exactly what you want it to do. You know, there isn't anything that's lost in translation or any kind of weird hold-ups. There isn't any weird rev hang or anything. Everything about this is just, it's perfect so far, and that perfection means that it's very easy to drive, and I really appreciate that, because I can't say that for all previous Porsches in the past. Some of them could have been a little tricky with the clutch and stuff, but this is really so easy to drive now, and so it's really the best of all the worlds the way they set this up. Just you won't ever again, you're just going at low speeds. But enough of this slow driving around stuff. Let's turn onto this back road here and see how it does. I'm going to put it into the sport chassis mode and the sport exhaust, and yeah, that's about it. There's no actual full-blown sport mode, but here we go. 114 horsepower, 309 pound-feet of torque, which sound like small numbers, but in a car that's under 3,200 pounds, that gets you up and going very quickly. Porsche claims 0 to 60 times of 3.7 seconds, even with this manual. So, I mean, the automatic PDK is going to be way faster than this manual is, but it still is really, I mean, that's impressive for a vehicle with 414 horsepower, which just goes to show how the specs, you know, don't always convey the full story. Man, and so, you know, now even I'm in third gear here, and just, you know, cruising around, you know, 3,000 RPMs and stopping on it. You get that beautiful Porsche flat six sound that you all know and love, and it feels really, really good. But even while we're stuck behind traffic, a couple other things to note here. So you have really, actually light steering, and it might shock you just how light this steering is, but it feels so good. It's still so precise, and you don't need overly heavy steering for it to feel sporty and good. This just, you know, combined with the tires, which just have so much grip, and, you know, you're on a really low profile tire and stuff, so you're going to feel so much to the steering, and it just feels really good. By the way, the tire setup here, you have Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires, and they are 245 wide in the front, 295s in the rear. They're 20-inch wheels all around, plenty of grip. Sport Cup 2 tires are very aggressive in their setup. I'm sure even the PS4S would have been totally fine, but you're, you know, if you're going to be doing track driving in this, you're going to want probably the Cup 2s, I'm supposing, even though you're going to have probably much shorter life out of these tires with those. But tons of grip, way more grip than you're ever going to be able to use on the street, honestly. All right, another acceleration, second gear. Man, this thing is so quick, and the gearing still is a little too tall, I think, because I can't even get close to that 8,100 RPM red line, you know, on normal roads. It's not going too fast. We'll try and find an opportunity to get up to that red line here later, but oh man, it's still so punchy though. Even in that mid-range, it's got tons of power. Now, you know, peak torque, like I said, comes out at 5,000 RPMs, and I think it's close to redline there for the peak horsepower. I think it's like 7,600 RPMs. So you really do want to wind it out to make all that power, but it still feels plenty punchy even if you don't take it to redline every time. Again, there's redline. Oh man, you gotta slow it back down, and these brakes do a really good job of slowing you down as well. Now again, these are not the carbon ceramics, but if you are interested in the peak braking performance, you can stop from 70 to 0, according to Car and Driver, at 148 feet with those carbon ceramics, which is really an intense braking session to go from 70 to 0 that short. Yeah, and so now, you know, in the sport chassis setup, you do feel the road a little bit more. It's a little bit more bumpy. It's still not uncomfortable, but, you know, I think honestly, for the type of driving we're doing, we can even just pop it out of that back to the normal. And it actually is pretty amazing how much it does smoothen up a little bit whenever you take it out of that sport mode. It's pretty impressive. Oh man, but this thing, this would be so much fun to do a track day in, because you're not going to, you know, get this car's full potential even close to it on any back roads and anything remotely close to legal speeds. And it's just like, you could probably do triple the speed limit around all these corners if you wanted to. It really is so stout. So as far as some of the other technical specs here of the 718 GT4, so the suspension's really trick. So it has the whole front axle actually from the 911 GT3. So you have that, you know, for your first level of competency, and then in the back you also have some rear suspension components from the GT3. Listen to that sound all day. By the way, in addition to that 3.7 seconds 0 to 60, you'd think, oh, well, maybe the launch is good, but it's not that fast, you know, after 60 time. But if you continue on and go into the quarter mile, Car and Driver got an 11.9 second quarter mile time at 120 miles per hour, so it is right now, that's for sure. Yeah, even going over potholes and stuff now, totally comfortable. Here's a nice tight corner. Man, yeah, this thing is like on rails. It really feels like...
That's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
So setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice low GT version here, is that you have an 8-speed wet dual clutch transmission, and so that is different than all the other K5s, which have just a normal regular automatic transmission. And this dual clutch is definitely something where you can feel that it should be much faster and snappier with its shifts and stuff, especially when you're doing manual shifts. We'll test that out more here once we go onto a back road. But other things in the meantime, you have excellent visibility here in all the K5s, you know, nice thin A-pillar, nice little A-pillar window there, so very easy to see forward. View out of the back is also really good. The deck lid does come up a little bit higher there, but honestly it still is totally acceptable for a sedan. So let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. There it is. But man, look, it's up and goes nicely. And actually it spun the tires less than I was expecting it to, because this isn't a warm day. It's only about 40 degrees, but kind of sounds like a Subaru. Am I crazy? It totally sounds like an STI kind of under acceleration. And it is piping in some sound through the speakers, but you do again have that louder exhaust out back too. But wow, this thing is strong. So anyway, the K5 GT, I'm loving that sound. Anyway, it has a 2.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It does 290 horsepower and 311 pound-feet of torque in this application. And by the way, those numbers are rated for 87 octane gas. You don't have to put premium in this. Premium will probably give you some benefits, but those numbers are on 87 octane, which is awesome. But man, in this Sport Plus mode, it is not messing around. It is just holding it at like 4,000 RPMs, even though I'm not even giving it any extra throttle. Man, this thing plants you in the back of your seat hard. It is impressive. I'm gonna go ahead and go into the manual mode here. It seems like the downshifts are immediate. Try some upshifts here. There's a wheel spin. Okay, so upshifts are a little slow sometimes still, not perfect, but downshifts, they are immediate, they're perfect. So especially if you're going to be doing some downshifts and stuff, I think manual shifting can be a lot of fun, but upshifts, yeah, it's still a little more relaxed than I would like, unfortunately. So, you know, fun to play around with the paddles maybe every once in a while, but personally I think you're better off just probably leaving it in drive, letting it do its own thing. But anyway, oh, this thing is fun. Coming up some corners here. Let's see how the GT version handles them. Diving in. Okay, not bad. It handles itself pretty well. So it does feel a tiny bit heavier than the regular version of the K5s, and that's because these actually do weigh a good bit more. This curb weight for a GT with this GT1 package like this one has, which has a few more bells and whistles, these are going to weigh just under 3,600 pounds. It's like 3,581, and that is about roughly 350 pounds heavier than what you're going to be getting with a normal K5. So obviously the bigger engine, the bigger brakes, all the other things they do to beef up the GT version here, that is going to be why you get that weight gain. It doesn't feel heavy though. I mean, we're still under 3,600 pounds, not heavy by any means. And it really does like to dive into corners. I'm pleasantly surprised. I was kind of honestly expecting these Pirelli P0 all-season tires to let me down a little bit more. But they're, I mean, aside from the straight line acceleration, sideways lateral grip here is pretty good, I have to say. Just on my little back roads here, but they are 245 wide Pirelli P0 all-season tires, and that is one stark difference between this and the mechanically similar Sonata N-Line. So that you can get a summer tire option. No summer tire option here on the K5 GT, but you know, you can upgrade tires yourself if you want. Just budget an extra $1,000 into your purchase price there and get yourself some stickier rubber, especially if you want to put down the power better in a straight line. But man, oh man. This thing is insanely fast. By the way, 0 to 60 time is officially rated at Kia at 5.8 seconds. Car and Driver, though, whenever they did a drag strip style burnout before their actual launch, to warm up the tires and stuff, they're able to get a 5.2 second 0 to 60 time, which feels more appropriate for this car, especially up and rolling. I mean, the way this thing puts on speed, easily 5 seconds, no doubt about it. Honestly, it feels like a high 4-second car to me, at least from, you know, behind the wheel here. Whenever you're rolling and you get on that gas, I mean, it hauls. It is fast. I'm very, very impressed with just how aggressive this thing is with putting the power down. It is It is fun, but yeah, it handles itself really well. I love the quicker steering. I think that feels great. I love, the brakes. Don't give me any doubts. Not that the brakes were lacking on a regular K5, but it's good to have, the reassuring brakes here whenever you're gaining speed like this thing does. And yeah, there isn't any kind of adaptive suspension or anything here in the K5. There's no way to even get all-wheel drive in the GT version either, so you're stuck with front-wheel drive and just the regular sport tune suspension. They didn't provide any specifics as far as how they sharpened up the suspension. They really haven't talked much about the GT. All right, so yeah, I wanted to hold me back, but man, second gear pulls like a train. Wow, yeah, once it hooks up, this thing flies. It has way more power than you would expect. Oh man, this thing is a riot. I love this thing. And transmission is very responsive. Give me the downshift as soon as I start getting that gas in sport mode here, and it just is ready to tear it up. Oh man, this thing is phenomenal. And it does handle itself really, really well too. So it's not like this thing is all about straight line acceleration and not. So setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice low seat. I always just really enjoy driving RDXs. They just have a really nice driving position. You have excellent visibility here. The hood really drops down nicely. A-pillars are a little bit on the thicker side, but the way they're positioned, they don't really get in my way. I just feel like I always have such great visibility here in the RDX. Great view out of the back. Other things, though, about the RDX. So one of the big improvements here for 2022 is that they really focused on making it quieter. That was something they heard as feedback from customers. So they wanted it to be quieter. So they did a ton of stuff. So all RDXs get thicker front fender liners. They also get enhanced noise cancellation here through the stereo, even a lower idle. So they really obsessed over everything to make this super refined even whenever you're standing still. And then if you go for a tech package and higher, you also get thicker carpets, you get additional sound insulation under the dashboard, and you also get acoustic glass. And so all of those things should add up to a quieter ride, and we will definitely check that out as we get up to some higher speeds here. But other things here, so they also retuned the brake booster, because that was another thing, is that they heard people kind of wanted the brake pedal to be a little bit more, I guess, progressive and easier to use. And I really have no complaints with it. I didn't really have many complaints with it previously, but now it all feels good. Throttle response is also really nice and strong. I really like the way the engine responds. You have a turbocharged 4-cylinder, and you have a 10-speed automatic. And the 10-speed automatic, since you have so many gears to pick from, it always is nice and responsive, and the car just does what you expect it to do. And so I just really like that, because you'd be surprised how many cars these days don't feel the way you would expect them to feel whenever you use the brakes and the gas and simple things like that. And yeah, you do still definitely hear this engine though. It's still, this little 4-cylinder. But I think the sound cancellation certainly will help you kind of dull things down. But we'll go ahead and put it up into the sport driving mode here, and that does several things. It sharpens up throttle, makes the steering a little bit heavier, and just kind of changes the responsiveness on everything, as well as the adaptive dampers, which we now have here in the RDX Advance with the A-Spec package. But anyway, let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. Okay, pretty responsive. Wow, yeah, it picks up nicely. Puts the power down very, very well. So you're still running like the same 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Still does 272 horsepower, 280 pound-feet of torque. And so 0 to 60 is going to be the same as it was, a few years back when these came out. It's about a 6.4 second 0 to 60. But man, this combo, I really love this 10-speed auto with this engine, especially up at speed here. Very punchy, very, very responsive. And honestly, I didn't even have the transmission in its sport mode. This is just normal drive. You can go and press the drive button again and put you up into sport mode. And that really made it sporty. So whenever I hit that, it wanted to go down to like a super low gear. It was sitting at like 5,000 RPMs. Now we're sitting at 3,500 RPMs. yeah, it makes it very, very eager. So that gets very, very excitable whenever you have that in the sport mode as well. But honestly, it was doing a really good job even just the normal drive mode. You also, do have paddle shifters here, and so you can get into a manual mode. And it's pretty responsive to the downshifts. We'll go ahead and try the upshifts here in a second. So it does auto upshift from first to second, but then beyond that, it's fairly responsive with those upshifts. It's not bad, but honestly, the transmission is programmed well enough. I don't think you really need to mess with it unless you just want to manually shift for some reason. But yeah, nice that it has it nonetheless. But this is the road that's a little bit rougher, generates a lot of road noise usually. And you still hear, some road noise. I don't think it's the quietest cabin in this segment still, but I'd say it's acceptable for, an entry-level luxury vehicle, and, still totally fine. It's not obnoxious or anything. But anyway, coming up some corners here that I always take, and let's see how the RDX handles. So again, we are in the sport mode, so that's the stiffer damper settings here to make it the sportiest setup possible. It also is working hand-in-hand with the super handling all-wheel drive system, which is a true torque vectoring all-wheel drive that actually overdrives the inside rear wheel there, instead of just doing a brake-based thing like you see with a lot of the competing systems that advertise torque vectoring. This is a real torque vectoring thing, and getting some downshifts. Yeah, that's the handling I love with the RDX. Yeah, these things handle so well. So it actually gave me a little bit of a tail happy feeling there coming out of that corner whenever I powered out of it. And it is a colder day. We're on all season tires. They're these Goodyear Eagle RSAs. 255 wide though, pretty wide tires for something in this segment as well. So very sporty with the tire setup, and so you have plenty of grip as well. But it's very eager to just play around with you here. Feels very engaging and just a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying the steering weight is also not too heavy here, and actually just feels really nice even in the sport mode, so it's not like you have this insanely heavy steering. It just feels good. Everything about this feels good, and I praised the RDX up and down back whenever I reviewed the 2019 3 years ago. I think is the best handling crossover in the luxury SUV segment, like where this is competing with all the stuff that has normal engines. I'm talking all the other 4-cylinder competitors. Whenever you go up to the M40i versions of the X.
The Ukrainian government, which is determined to break it down, seeing it as pro-Russian. The Metropolitan himself, Metropolitan Pavel, was...
That's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
Alright, so setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice slow style. Well, of course, you're sitting up nice and high in the F-150, just like any other pickup truck, and pretty good visibility too. You do have this A-pillar with this grab handle, which is a little thicker than I would like. It's thicker than when you get on the average car or SUV, but you're sitting up high enough, it shouldn't be too big of an issue, and you have excellent visibility down here with these doors, and since they scoop down so low and the glass is so large, really great view out of the sides. The view out of the back is also very good in typical truck fashion, no surprises there. Other things here about the F-150 you notice. So this one runs the 10-speed automatic transmission, and they all run 10-speed automatics, by the way, and it's usually pretty good. It's very quick with its shifts, but there are a few times every once in a while where it's a little rough in my 42 miles of driving I've done so far, and I'll continue to test that here during my entire week that I have here with the F-150. Another thing I really love is the brake response here. Really starts to bite right towards the top of the pedal, and it's very responsive. So it gives me a lot of confidence that, the second that I need the brakes, I can count on them to act right away, and I really like that. Throttle response is also really good, especially here at this naturally aspirated V8 that this version is running. Typically the XLT the standard engine is going to have is a 3.3 liter naturally aspirated V6. this one is optioned up for the V8, which is the XLT trim is a $2,000 option. If you go for like a Lariat trim, it's only an $800 option. And so, yeah, it just depends on the trim. There's a million different variations for these F-150s, so you'll have to go in the configurator and really dive into the options yourself if you want to figure out exactly how much it would cost for what you want and how it all would pair up and stuff. But anyway, so yeah, that's all good. And yeah, steering weight also feels nice and natural, feels pretty good. It is a lot of turns, typical truck fashion, so you really got to crank the wheel a lot here in these to, get your turning done. And, but yeah, I've been really impressed with the refinement in these new F-150s. I mean, you hear, it's actually a fairly windy day. You don't hear any wind noise. Road noise is very subdued. You hear a little bit of tire noise and stuff. But it's really not bad. You really don't even hear much of this V8 engine either. It does have a nice little V8 burble to it whenever you get on it, which is always welcome, especially if you're opting up for this V8 engine. Chances are you want to hear it, and so it's nice to have that. Although it is very mild, much quieter than a Mustang or something like that. But we'll go ahead and put it up into the sport mode. There's several different drive modes. There's ones for bad weather conditions and muddy roads and stuff. But anyway, we'll put it up into the sport mode here. Let's turn down onto this back road and see how it does. Here we go. Very responsive. That sounds really good, doesn't it? Man, so the F-150 here runs the 5-liter naturally aspirated V8 engine. It's port directed and direct injected. And for 2021, it actually has cylinder deactivation as well, which is a new thing for 2021. But it just goes down to 4 cylinders. It's not quite as advanced as the Chevy system, which has all kinds of variations. This one just shuts down 4 of those cylinders whenever it deems it's appropriate. But anyway, it's a good amount of power. It's 5 more horsepower than last year for 400 horsepower total, 410 pound-feet of torque, which is 10 more pound-feet than last year. And 0 to 60 times are probably going to be in the low 6-second range. So that will also depend on the tire setup you have, wheelbase, all the options you have as far as how heavy it is and all that kind of stuff. But I'd say it's safe to assume something in the low 6 seconds here for the V8 powered ones. And also in sport mode here, it really must open up something, or it's piping in something with the speakers. I don't know what's going on, but it definitely has more of a character to this V8 engine and more sound in this sport mode than it did in the regular mode, which I've been using for the past 40-some miles here. Yeah, this sounds good, and it's so responsive and so strong feeling. The V8 engine is really great. Now, it's not the most powerful engine, not even close these days, with the Power Boost Hybrid having the most torque and power, and even the regular EcoBoost 3.5-liter V6, that will also do about the same horsepower, but way more torque, almost 100 extra pound-feet of torque in that one. So, this isn't the strongest motor, but it's still going to be one of the best as far as payload goes. It's going to be very strong towing still, and you really don't have much of a fuel economy disadvantage over those EcoBoost engines either. So this V8, I think, is still a really great choice. Well, we're coming up some corners here, and let's see how the new F-150 handles. Again, so we got these 18-inch wheels and 65 series tires on this one. So it's not going to handle as well as some other F-150s with larger wheels and a little bit of a more street-oriented setup is going to feel. This is not going to be quite that good. But yeah, it still does a decent job. These modern trucks still handle much better than their predecessors. I don't think the handling is wildly different from the previous generation F-150. It's been several years since I drove one of those, and that was also a 2.7 EcoBoost that I had in the last F-150 I tested in the previous generation. So that's going to be, probably a lighter motor than this V8. But it does okay. It's a truck. You can't really expect a whole lot here. And again, I would strongly suggest going up to some bigger wheels and tires if you're, looking for something to be a little bit sharper. The 20-inch wheels you get on the higher trims should have a little bit of better handling. But basically it just really comes down to the fact that this suspension setup still is pretty old school. So unlike the Ram, which has, an air suspension you can get and has coil springs in the back, this is still leaf springs in the back, nothing too advanced. There's no, option to get a more advanced suspension here in the F-150s. It's just, the basic stuff, and that's it. So You know, I think that because of that, this doesn't handle as well as the Ram. It doesn't ride as well as the Ram. The Ram is much smoother. That is one thing I've noticed, is even these roads, which, you know, aren't super bumpy, they're not super smooth, so they create a little bit of noise, but they don't have a ton of potholes and stuff. But this, I've just noticed in the past day or so I've been driving the truck so far, that it's very busy with its ride, at least, again, with this suspension setting. Again, if you have a different version with different wheels and tires, different wheelbase, different cab configuration, I mean, there's a million different variations, but if you're looking at a 6.5-foot bed crew cab version, it's going to be a little bit of a bouncier ride, and you know, it's not quite as buttoned down, and like I said, just feels a little more floaty, which means it's very comfortable, but it does just mean that you do feel all the little bumps still, and you're always just kind of bopping around, you know, I guess is the best way to put it. So, you know, I would say that it's not, again, it's just not even close to being as nice as the Ram as far as ride quality goes, but it's a truck. Most people probably don't care a whole lot, and I think Ford was really just going for comfort, and I think it does have that floaty, soft truck ride that I think most truck buyers will probably want. I will say this ride is more comfortable than the Chevy. Those are a little bit stiffer with their ride, a little less comfortable. This is certainly, I think, more comfortable than those. I think the ride is also a little bit more well-behaved than the Nissan Titan. Man, this V8 is really satisfying to use. Oh, it's great. Yeah, I know the EcoBoost engines are very impressive. I'm sure the you know, a new hybrid version is also very impressive, but maybe it's just because I own a Mustang Bullitt, but something about having a V8 always feels nice, and I think this is a great choice here. Anyway, so a couple other things here. So one thing that does help out the handling a little bit is that, you know, with the aluminum body panels here on the F-150, it certainly makes it a little bit on the lighter side compared to some of the others, and so, you know, these start with a curb weight, I think, around 4,900 pounds. Again, there's a whole Excel spreadsheet for exactly what the curb weight is going to be depending on your wheelbase and engine and, you know, like I said, all the other millions of variables you get with the F-150. But I will say that it does probably feel a little bit lighter than some of the others out there as far as just, you know, you're feeling, it doesn't feel quite as weighty as the Ram, I would say, and probably even a little less weighty than the Silverado and stuff too. So it has that going for it, at least in the handling department, even if it doesn't have, you know, too advanced of a suspension setup. But some other specs here about the F-150 that are most important for truck buyers is, you know, payload and towing. And that is one area where the F-150 really excels and really is one of the best in its class. Payload, by the way, is actually best in class as far as the available payload you can get. This maxes out beyond the others. So the payload rating is another whole Excel spreadsheet of, you know, depending on what wheelbase you get, what engine you get, what, you know, configuration and variant and all kind of stuff, that will all affect, you know, what payload you actually get on your F-150. But for these V8 versions, the payload ratings are some of the highest out there. This one is going to range somewhere around 2,100 pounds to about 2,650 for the V8s, depending on, again, what wheelbase and stuff. But that's kind of the range you're looking at there. And these V8s also tow between like 9,400 pounds and 13,000 pounds is their range, but you can max out with an EcoBoost F-150 around 14,000 pounds, which is very impressive. And if you have a normal driver's license, you're only going to be able to tow in most states about 10,000 pounds anyway. So all the engine options here in the F-150 should be able to tow what you're legally allowed, unless you're going to have a more advanced license. So it should be more than sufficient for basically everybody out there with normal towing needs. Oh, we're hitting some potholes here on this road going about 35 miles an hour, and it still soaks them up really well. For a thing with leaf springs in the back, I mean, you know, and it is, of course, body on frame and stuff, like, you know, any other full-size truck, but you don't really have a lot of that cab jitteriness that you used to get, where you could really feel the bed rocking around back there and vibrating a lot more. You get a lot less of that here in this newest generation, and so it really, you know, the whole thing just feels a little more solid and, you know, just a little less truck-like than before, I think, in a good way. It's still obviously, it's not going to feel quite as refined as like a Honda Ridgeline or something like that, which is an actual unibody truck. You know, it still gives you a lot more reverberations and unrefinement than something like that would, which really feels a lot more like an actual SUV instead of an actual truck. But, you know, as far as body on frame stuff goes, I think this is still, again, pretty good. Ram is still the king, though. Another really big improvement here for the 2021 F-150s is their Ford Copilot 360 system. So the 2.0 system is actually standard on everything from an XLT and up, the base XL trim. I guess since that's for people that want something really bare bones or fleet buyers, you know, they don't have it on that trim. But XLT and up here, you do get it. It gives you a whole laundry list of features, and it's really great to have that. Now this one has the 2.0 assist option, so that adds extra stuff. You get adaptive cruise control. It also will do lane keeping assist and stuff, which we'll try out here on the highway in a minute. And actually, even later on in 2021 here, you'll be able to get hands-free driving in higher trims of the F-150. And so that is something where it's going to have driver monitoring stuff built into the higher versions of the F-150. This one does not have those sensors built in. They'll monitor the driver, make sure you're paying attention, but then allow you to do truly hands-free driving, much like a GM Super Cruise system. And so it's very awesome. We'll have to test that out whenever that actually is available to consumers and see how well that actually works in reality. But very promising to hear that they're actually doing something similar, because I absolutely love Super Cruise and think it really takes highway driving to the next level, and it's very luxurious and helps you to really relax. Man, this V8 pulls really strong too in these higher RPMs. You also get the torque a little bit sooner here in the 2021 V8 version than you did in the past. But I mean, the way this thing climbs in speed, it's strong. It really is a very strong runner out here on the highway. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and put on this adaptive cruise control system here. And I do have the lane keeping assist system on as well. Now that is something you have to make sure is actually turned on in the vehicle settings. You go into the features tab here in the Sync 4 screen, and you have to actually select that. This truck did not have it already on, and so instead it was just a lane departure warning type of thing where it would just be like, hey, you're going over the lines, but not actually help me steer. But now we're going around a corner here on the highway, and it is actually doing the steering here. And so this is the first time I've encountered a Ford system that does this, and so this is my first time testing out their application here of these lane centering systems. And I also have the lane centering on its more advanced settings, so that it really does a good job of keeping itself in the lanes here. So I'll continue to test it here today and throughout the rest of the week to see just how well it works. But so far, it's doing a pretty good job. It's not ping-ponging around really. It's doing a really good job of keeping itself centered in the lane. It really did a good job of steering there on that first corner. And while we're out on the highway here, another thing that's really good, I mean, you do have some road noise here, but I'd say it's pretty good for a truck, and especially a low-grade truck at that, as far as the trim levels and stuff. So I think it's really nice out here just cruising on the highway. The adaptive cruise system works great. That is something I've tried out in other Fords in the past, and I tried it out yesterday as well, and that does do a very good job. It's not too rough or anything. It's very smooth. So I don't know if you saw it there, but I'm letting the vehicle do the steering for me. I'm just kind of hovering my hands over the wheel here, and there was a couple of times where it got a little shaky with the steering there, and wasn't perfectly centered, but it is doing a pretty good job. And these road lines are also painted a little oddly with the way you have the paving strip there in the middle. That might be throwing it off a tiny bit, but it is doing a pretty good job. But you can see, I mean, if you're looking here, the steering wheel is doing a little bit of sawing back and forth to try and keep itself really centered. Maybe it's fighting a little bit of a crosswind here, so this is a little bit of a windy day. But it's doing a pretty good job here, I gotta say. It's not the best, it's not the greatest out there. There's some other lane keeping assist systems that are better, but this is still pretty good. It also doesn't have too much intelligence as far as when your hands are actually on the wheel, because it was telling me to keep my hands on the wheel while my hand, as you can see, was on the wheel. So I think you have to give it a little bit of a resistance every once in a while for it to know that you're actually here. So I think this is still going to be obviously one of the most advanced systems out there. No one else is shooting for hands-free steering here this year at least. I know GM has the technology, but it's not in Silverados yet, and Ram doesn't have anything like this. So I think this is still the most advanced system out there, and so for highway driving, as of right now, I'd say this is probably going to be one of the most relaxing systems out there, because you can just let the truck kind of do some of those minor corrections for you. Obviously, you still have to be doing the steering yourself and paying attention and all that. But yeah, so I'm going to be driving this new F-150 for the next week here, and I'll drive all over the place and do a bunch of hauling and stuff, and then I'll come back and give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on the pricing and its competition, and anything else that I noticed here during my week of driving. Alright, so I've been driving the new F-150 here for a week now, and I've put 238 miles on it in my week of driving here, and I really like the F-150. I mean, it's a very nice companion if you're someone that's into transmissions, if you're not looking at sports cars and stuff. The best transmissions are the ones you don't notice when they're working, and they work, you know, basically smoothly and flawlessly in the background. And unfortunately, this 10-speed makes itself known every once in a while. I don't love that about it.
Recognize the admission of Finland and Sweden to NATO, because we all know that, looking from an historical perspective, NATO members have brought their national issues to the
Now that's volume at 14. Let's get some volume.
Alright, so setting off here in the 2023 Integra. So the first thing you notice about this, well, you have a really nice slow. The first thing that I notice is the steering feels a little bit lighter. And I noticed this with the 2021 Mazda 3 Turbo as well. And I don't know if it's a 2021 change or if it's a turbo change. Because I believe they did also retune some stuff for 2021 models just to make them a little more comfortable. But I think that was mostly suspension stuff. So I don't think that that really affected steering, but it might have. Regardless, I like the steering in the turbos much better. It's a little bit lighter, which is appropriate for this type of vehicle, but it's no less precise. It still feels really good, and it is still really nicely weighted. I just think it's just a little bit easier to use than the previous, regular CX-30 and old Mazda 3 with their heavier steering. But anyway, other things here, it's a nice smooth ride. You a little bit of a higher seating position here, like you want that in a crossover, and good visibility as well. Although the windows are a little bit on the smaller side, especially on the sides here, a little bit more narrow than the larger glass you're probably going to be used to in other crossovers in this segment. But I mean, nice thin A-pillar is very easy to see forward. View out of the back is very good as well, and so no complaints there whatsoever. And it's nice and quiet and refined in here too. You feel some bumps here and there and stuff, but I mean, it is so good at soaking all that up and just making this feel very just relaxed and refined. Throttle response is also immediate here, really. I mean, especially whenever you're at lower speeds and stuff, but I mean, you just tap on that gas, you immediately get a nice response and exactly what you're expecting. And that's part of how Mazda really engineers and designs their vehicles and how you're supposed to interact with their vehicles. It's all very natural feeling, like the brake pedal. It's a little bit of a heavier brake pedal than some other vehicles, but that means that you use your calf muscle instead of your shin muscle, which is weaker. And so, it's less driver fatigue in the Mazda here when you're using the brakes a lot. And same thing goes, throttle response is exactly how you expect it to be. And the steering all feels good. Everything is very human-centric and just feels very natural and organic whenever you're driving this vehicle. It's also, we're at some fairly low speeds here, like 20 miles an hour, but you don't hear any road noise or wind noise. It's just all feels very nice and just a very pleasant place to be. But I went ahead and put it up into the sport mode, and let's turn down onto this back road here and see how the CX-30 Turbo does. Here we go. Wow! All right, very responsive. Wow! Yeah, this thing gets up and moves. Oh man, this is impressive. So, CX-30 Turbo here runs the 2.5-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, and it does 250 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque on 93 octane gas. If you go for 87 octane gas, which is totally fine to run in this, they say, you get 227 horsepower, and then you're going to get 310 pound-feet of torque. So you only miss out on 10 pound-feet of torque with that. And they actually say that the power curves between 87 and 93 are very similar up till about 4,000 RPMs, and then over 4,000 is where you kind of get a little bit of a harder pull from the 93 octane. But in most people's normal driving, you're not going to really be revving this thing super high, and so you're actually in realistic driving scenarios not going to notice a difference in power between 87 and 93, which is a really nice touch that they tune it for the 87 and stuff, and it's totally fine to run on that, and it's pretty cool that that's an option. And so yeah, it's a very impressive acceleration. Now Mazda does not like quoting 0 to 60. They don't like 0 to 60 times because it doesn't aggregate accurately portray what you're feeling. They say they prefer to refer to acceleration in as far as G and the amount of G forces you're feeling. I'm not going to give you that number because it's pretty irrelevant compared to, you know, without comparing it with anything else. But what I will say is that, you know, Motor Trend did do a 0 to 60 time of the Mazda 3 Turbo, and that was about a 5.9 seconds 0 to 60. You know, this is a tiny bit heavier, so I would say, you know, maybe something 6 second, you know, or low 6 second range for those that are trying to put it in the context of a 0 to 60 time. But I will say that it feels very strong. It's very, very impressive. I think for the type of vehicle, it's way more power than you get in basically everything else. It's way more torque than anything else in this segment, luxury segment or non-luxury. But anyway, we're coming up some corners here. Let's see how the CX-30 Turbo handles life. Very flat handling. And it has good grip too, considering this only is running 215 wide, you know, all season tires. I mean, 215s are pretty skinny, but it's still, I mean, it feels really good. It feels so dynamic, so natural. It just going around these corners, it loves it. Yeah, it really does a good job. And so also whenever you're in sport mode like I am now, it actually has this G-vectoring control system, which it uses all the time. But in sport mode, it's a little bit more aggressive to allow the you know, back end to rotate a little bit more and kind of give you a little bit of a better turn in there. So it's a little more aggressive in the sport mode, you know, for all that kind of stuff. And also the way that they set up even like their traction control system, if you're accelerating out of a corner, they will allow you to get some wheel spin because they assume that you want full power and you're trying to, you know, get out of a situation, and so they're not going to pull back on power like a lot of other systems do with their traction controls. And so, I mean, everything about this just feels so sporty and dynamic, and that's where the CX-30 Turbo is going to blow the doors off of all its competitors. You know, it's really, really impressive. Just this much power in a vehicle this small is pretty cool. I mean, these only weigh about 3,500 pounds. I think it's 3,505 to be exact, which means you have about 117 pound increase over the non-turbo CX-30. But I don't feel the extra 100 pounds. I really don't. It feels super dynamic. This feels for some reason like it's even a little bit more jumpy than the Mazda 3 Turbo. Like, that was strong, but for some reason in the CX-30 here, it just feels a tiny bit stronger. Now, I am also testing this in the winter time. It was a little bit warmer whenever I was testing the Mazda 3 Turbo, so that might account for some of it. You know, it's only 25 degrees Fahrenheit today, so this engine is performing at its absolute peak, and so that could certainly have something to do with what's going on here. But man, this thing feels so strong. The steering, again, I just love going around corners in this thing. It's less work in the turbo version than it is in the non-turbo with its heavier steering. This feels fantastic. I love taking this thing around corners. Oh, it's a lot of fun. Another acceleration. Yeah, this thing flies. Oh man, by far the most fun crossover in this segment, hands down. I can tell you that right now without even thinking twice about it. Oh. I've never had this much fun in a little crossover like this. It's really that impressive. But anyway, I was so taken aback by the acceleration and everything earlier. I forgot to mention that this vehicle has a 6-speed automatic transmission. That is one area where this is different than a lot of the competitors, which either run like a dual clutch thing, or they run some type of CVT or something like that, and with most of the others out there. So to have a real automatic transmission is great, because there's, especially only having 6 gears, there is no hunting around. It just relies on that engine torque to, you know, and sometimes a downshift or two, but I mean, it usually doesn't really need to do much shifting because it's in one of those gears, it has enough power and it still flies. You don't need a million ratios for this thing to feel fast. It's, you know, just got the 6 gears, but it just takes off. Yeah, this thing is a champ. Oh man, but yeah, so it's really, you know, this transmission, I don't really have too many issues with it. In sport mode here, it also does hang on to the higher gears here, so, you know, it's just hanging out at 3,000 RPMs, just for the fun of it, just to have more power on tap. But with how torquey this motor is, honestly, I think to get the best acceleration performance, you're probably even better off leaving it out of sport mode, because it'll rely on that low end torque more and really give you that seat of the pants push that, you know, really helps you to feel like you're flying. But I mean, in sport mode, it's really strong too, but man, the way this thing rockets out of a corner. This is so dynamic. And they did say that the CX-30 Turbo, they didn't do any suspension changes aside from just making it basically account for the weight of the extra, weight over the nose for the turbo here and stuff. But otherwise, they say they try to make it feel pretty close to the regular CX-30. But honestly, the regular CX-30 didn't feel this much fun. I mean, yes, the power is definitely making it more exciting, but this just feels a little lighter on its feet, surprisingly. I know the exact opposite of what you expect. The heavier version of this feels lighter on its feet, but it does. I think it's that steering and just how, that back end can rotate a little bit more here with the extra power. Really, really impressive. But I'm going to try out the manual mode here very briefly. So it's not quick. Downshifts are actually pretty immediate. This is a typical Mazda transmission, so there's no surprises here. If you have any experience with any of the other ones, it's good. It's just the upshifts don't give you a shift as fast as you'd like. So personally, I would just leave it in automatic mode. But if you do want to, have the paddle shifters here, you do get them in, these higher trims of the CX-30. It is nice to have, but not a must-have in my opinion. But we're also, doing like 30, 35 on this rougher road. And it still is nice and quiet. You don't really hear too much road noise. But I'm going to take it out of the sport mode here. And it still gives you a downshift immediately and takes off. I mean, it's pretty impressive. You don't need to be in any sport mode. It just is good in its normal mode, which is sometimes rare in other vehicles. And so you don't have to fiddle with a bunch of stuff. You just hop in this thing, drive, and it always responds. It gives you what you want, and it's very satisfying to drive. I really, really love that. But anyway, outside of the sporty dynamics and stuff, hitting some potholes and stuff now. Still very smooth. I mean, again, this is a subcompact crossover, so you're going to feel bumps and stuff. It's not going to feel like you're floating on air or anything, but it is still, very good and about as good as you can expect in this segment. And honestly, it's a much more smoother ride than what you're going to be getting in a lot of the competitors. So the Mazda just continues to feel like it's a luxury car that's not charging luxury money in many ways. I mean, with the amount of refinement, the lack of wind noise, if you're in some of the other, competitors in this vehicle, you'd have way more noise in here. All right, so now we're out on the highway, and it's still a very nice cruiser. I mean, it's a pretty windy day, and you still don't even really hear much wind noise. Road noise is very subdued. I mean, this is really
taken to a hearing, arrested by the Ukrainian security services, taken to a hearing.
Platform of the alliance whenever any particular topic came to the agenda.
Let's to thank one of our sponsors, Farmers Insurance.
Somebody needs saving. Don't worry, citizen. I'm here to save.
Already saved.
Today?
Switched him to Farmers so he could save an average of $441 on his auto insurance.
Okay. I guess I'll go save the world or whatever.
If you need saving, get a quote from Farmers.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.